I first know I was a poet? I didn't. I think poetry was probably the last thing in writing that I got into. I was much more interested in fiction. Um, I think ever since I read the Naughty Little Sister stories and also Roald Dahl, I wanted to be able to do that with words. I wanted to create these magical worlds. I wanted to create these characters that had this effect on people. And so I remember for years, ever since I was a little girl, I always imagined that I'd be one day signing books in this bookshop and I'd be this fiction writer. I'd be writing fantasy novels. And it wasn't until a lot later that I discovered this magic in poetry that I'd perhaps been looking for. Things that I couldn't get out of my own fiction. I wanted to capture something, but I was no good with plot. I often didn't follow projects through. And I remember sitting in class one day, the only poetry that I'd been exposed to at that point was, you get the sort of silly sort of verse they give to children when you're younger. That never quite did anything for me. I had a lot of friends who liked that sort of silly rhyme, but I wanted something a little bit more from it. And I was reading, for example, Wordsworth when I was older, when I was in comprehensive school. And again, that did nothing for me. And I'm sorry to any Wordsworth fans here. I can appreciate it now, but there was nothing I was getting from that daffodil poem. And still to this day I'll read it and there is something I'm missing. It's just one of those poems I can't grasp, and I'll put my hands up and say that. Love Keats, there's a lot of romantic poets I do appreciate. Wordsworth just unfortunately maybe it's just one of those that just doesn't fit with me. But when I got to my GCSE year, my GCSE teacher introduced me to Seamus Heaney, and it was at that point, it was reading Midterm Break, and I remember I got to the end of that poem and just something hit me right here, and I still remember that little poppy bruise that he described, and that 4-foot box, a foot for every year, that ended, and I thought, this is what I've been looking for. It's this capture of feeling in just this tiny moment, crafted so perfectly with these carefully selected words, these beautiful images, the tearless coughing sobs of the mother. I just thought, this is what I want to be able to do. This is the effect that I want to have on people. And from that point, that's when I thought, right, I need to learn more about poetry. And I went to do my A-levels. I got introduced to Caroline Duffy, then came across Sylvia Plath. And I think it was when I got to Plath, that's when I really got into it. And I had Dylan Thomas's collected poems, which I was obsessed with. And from there on, I've discovered Welsh writers. I went straight into looking at the Parthian writers from there in my A-level year, and that's when I decided, okay, now I want to be a poet, and if ever I get published, this is where I would like to see my work alongside these poets. And I worked, and throughout university, that was my goal, was to be alongside these writers that I'd admired for so long, to be able to make people feel something in just this tiny condensed moment. And recently that has changed a little. I've got more into performance, and I think you're always growing and developing. There's always something more you can get, something you're always learning, and I'm still learning from others. I think you never actually stop. For example, I've long been in awe of performers like Mab Jones, for example. When I saw her perform Howl, I just remember thinking, I wish I could do that. I wish I could stand up and actually deliver my work properly without shaking and looking at the page. And that's one thing I've really, really been working at this year. And rather than go into things all at once, like, okay, I'm going to be a spoken word artist and I want to do this and I want to do that, just little things at a time. So I started with, okay, I want to write my first poem. So that was something I worked on. Or I want to get published in this publication, or I'd like to win some sort of competition, or I want to try and write in this style that I admire, or I want to be able to perform. And right now I'm at the performance stage, and I think it's important to just break it down and just develop and grow and change over the years, because your writing will grow with you. And I look at things that I've written perhaps in my university year that now is quite laughable. I just read it back and I just think this is really terrible. And I'm sure I will look back at the things I've written now and think exactly the same. But I accept that, and I'm always learning from other people as well. So yeah, just break it down. Have little goals. If you're going to be a writer, fixate on the one thing at once. Don't try and do it all. Don't compare yourself, because that's one mistake I was making over and over, was I'll never be as good as this person who can just stand up there with all this confidence. I needed to nail the page element of it first and work on just little bits of either standing up at open mics, learning my poems off by heart, and then I think recording them, so uncomfortable as it is, just watching back to see how I'm performing things, where things are going wrong, where I can do things better. And also just be kind to yourself, because we've got enough comparison, we've got enough people rejecting us or attacking us for what we do. Just take it at your own pace, go easy, and just be playful with it. I never actually thought I'd be a well-travelled poet. Probably 10 years ago I probably would have laughed at that, because I'm just one of these people who went to uni in Swansea, has always lived in Swansea and has never got any further. But one way my work has really developed has been international experiences, because you're always told, write what you know, and I'm going to argue against that, and I'll just say, no, write what you don't know, because part of the fun is allowing the poem to write you, if that makes sense. So, for example, when I went to India, I didn't put too much pressure on myself to write while I was there. It was the experience that was kind of writing the poems in my head for me. So I'd write down little snippets of notes, but the poems didn't actually happen until a few months after I came home, which is probably the mistake I made in Sweden, where every day I'd sit in front of the laptop or my tablet and just think, I need to write something, I need to do something, I need to show what I'm doing, I need to be writing constantly, and that's not it. Like, part of poetry is living, it's condensing life into the written word. So when you go for international experiences, if anyone ever offers you the chance to travel, do it, but soak it up. That's kind of what you want to do, and you want to make connections, you want to make more than just connections for literary projects, you want to make friends as well, because I count the people that I met in Sweden and the people I met in India, and also the exchanges I've been doing in Ireland. They're more to me than just literary connections. They're more to me than writers. They're friends as well that I can turn to when I want advice on my writing, or when I want to talk about their projects or new ideas or collaborations. And I definitely wanted to travel more. It totally changed my outlook. I never actually thought that you could fall in love with a place until I went to India. It's one place I've perhaps almost went through a stage of odd grief when I came home. I just longed to be back there. I thought that it wasn't quite finished for me and I wanted to go back. And as soon as lockdown finishes, I've got everything saved up. I'm going to go back. I'm going to travel more. And I'd love to write. I've got an idea for another project that I want to write by myself and just explore a little bit more, talk to more people, meet more people. And I've done talks with British Council, and I'm enthusiastic that everyone should have that experience. It doesn't have to be the other side of the world. For example, I've been to Ireland, and that for me was a huge thing, because we did the Wexford Literary Festival. But even just little moments like we were just inside this pub, and it was they locked it after hours, and people were getting up and singing and sharing poetry, and that moment for me just stayed with me. And I didn't write anything, I didn't feel compelled to get something out of it, but just hearing other people's words, that made me want to explore more about Irish writers, or when I was in India, I was very, very keen on the things I was reading with Bengali writing, and it's something I'm still reading now. I recently reviewed a book on Bengali poetry, and I've absolutely fallen in love with so many of the poets in there. And I think that's part of it as well. You're not just going out there for that 2 week span or that month. You're taking away just a little bit of culture, and it's something for you to learn more about in your own time and develop over years. It's something that's going to shape your work. My second collection, for example, is scattered with poems from India that I would love to continue, and there are ones from Sweden as well that are sort of half written that I'm still working on, and it's one place again that I'd like to go back and work more on, because I don't think you just visit somewhere and finish there. There's a lot more. You can't get the whole story out of one project. These are experiences that shape your life and that shape your writing in the long run. Swansea is one of the best places you can be if you want to get into performance poetry, and it's one of the reasons I'm so grateful that I stayed in Swansea for university. I think if I hadn't had that support network, if I hadn't had just the sort of poetry open mics that I could walk into and see everyone fully supported, everyone applauded, people at all stages in their writing journeys, and such a close-knit network, I don't think I ever have got the courage to stand up there and deliver my work, because it's just not something you'd ever imagine. Not when you spent school barely speaking, when you've been bullied a lot for the fact that you don't speak up. The idea of just standing up in front of a microphone and sharing your words with an entire room of strangers is absolutely terrifying. But one of the things that the Swansea Poetry Open Mics do so well is to welcome any newcomers and treat them as friends, because I don't think there is a single open mic night that I've come across in Swansea that hasn't just brought people under their wing, tried to help them develop, and cheered them on at all stages of their writing journey. I mean, it strips everything from the elitism that we often have to come up against as working class poets. And you get it's not just Swansea either. You get so much of this in the Cardiff poetry scene as well, North Wales. There's Neath Poems and Pints, and I think it's something the Welsh do really well. Is we don't judge on background. We don't assume things about anyone. It's just, if you have a passion for poetry, if you love words, you're part of the group. For example, if you're just stuck on a night, you just really fancy going to do some open mic, there's almost an open mic for every single night in Swansea. There's, you got Talisman on Tuesday evenings. You do sometimes get live poets on a Monday evening in Swansea. You'll get Neath Poems and Pints on a Thursday. You'll get Howl on a Thursday. You get one-off poetry events. That you're never short of things to do, and you can always count on the fact that you will be supported. And I think it's something we take quite for granted, but people who come to university here or who visit just say, I wish we'd had this in our own city. And I think it's something, when I'm travelling, I'm looking for open mic nights, I often don't find them. Not as commonly as you do here. So I think we're blessed in that respect, and I think it's part of Dylan's legacy as well. You go and you see the street art dedicated to Dylan. We've still got the Dylan Thomas birthplace. We've got for many years we had the Do Not Go Gentle Festival, the Dylan Thomas Festival. We've got the Swansea Fringe Festival, which is incredible celebration of all of the arts. You've got music, you've got photography, you've got visual arts, poetry, the Swansea Poetry Slam. That's another one. I mean, one thing that I'd always vowed never to do after I did a poetry slam, which was really competitive, and I remember I was able to see the scores that the judge were giving me, and I remember one holding up 0, and I completely died there when they did that, and I said I'm never gonna go into any sort of spoken word competition again. But last year I did Swansea poetry slam, and that one they hide the scores. Everyone gets a round of applause, everyone gets the same amount of time, the same amount of applause, and it's just a good bit of fun. There's nothing nasty or competitive about it at all, even though it is a competition. You wouldn't think it. It's almost like another open mic. We need more of that. We need healthy, friendly, and supportive competition, not divisions. We need to be creating bridges between people, not creating rifts. And I think it's one thing that the Swansea poetry scene does so well. What am I working on presently? Well, I'm coming to the end of doing the edits for Small, which is my second book. Susie Wildsmith has been an absolutely amazing editor for that, and she's edited it really, really thoroughly, and it's almost unrecognisable from the manuscript I sent her now, because she's just picked things up that perhaps I'd missed, and it's had time to grow and develop, and it's reached a point now where I feel like I'm quite proud of what I've written and what she's helped me edit as well. And I think that's something that perhaps I didn't allow myself to say for the first collection, because of self-criticism, and you do learn that actually it's okay to feel proud of something you've written. And I know that I've accepted that not everyone will like it, it's quite different. But it had to be written at that time. It was where my mindset was, it was where my writing was, and I'm happy that I've put down into words what I felt needed to be there when I felt compelled to do it. The other projects I'm on at the moment, so I'm doing a brilliant collaboration at the moment with Mary Ellis Dunning, which takes all the women of myth and fairy tale and literature and gives them a different side to the story. So we're looking at the heroes and the villains and trying to tell an alternative view on things. So perhaps these quiet princesses, perhaps they've got a strength that got overlooked, or we'll try and twist the story a little bit. The villains, perhaps they're not as evil as we think they are. That's just an assumption, or it's the way we're led to believe. Or is there a reason that they're acting this way? Is there some sort of sympathy we should have for them? Is there some other motive that they've got? And the women in literature as well that get overlooked. Like, for example, we've got Shakespeare's Cordelia, Goneril and Regan. We've got Jane Eyre. We've got Hera. We've got Rapunzel. It's just a complete mix, and it's constantly surprising me. And it's such a different thing to be writing, but have someone else look at the words and work through them with you and pick up on things that you wouldn't pick up on, or challenge you, or bring out your strengths, or help you with your weaknesses. And I think it's something that everyone should try, is just to find someone who's got a similar style to you and try and write something together, because it does totally transform your own writing as well. And I'm finding that with trying to write my own personal thing. So I've also got a collaboration with Oliver James Lomax. So this is based on the Battle of Mice, My Dog. So that's like sort of a love story told in poetry, from a female who lives in Wales at that time to a male who lives in England at that time. It's a battle between Wales and Warwick, and that's again is a totally different one, and he's got a totally different style again, and I think it's more individual in that one, in that I'll write a poem, he'll write a poem, and we'll respond to each other, whereas with Mari and myself, we edit each other's poems, and it's just as insightful as that is. It's just a different way of going about it. And I'm totally open to doing more collaborations with people, because I think this is something I've overlooked for too long. And as for other projects, I'm enjoying recording my poetry. I'd like to get more into spoken word this year, and I'm trying to write what I think is a pamphlet at the moment. But I've always been fascinated by people. When I've sat and I've sort of gone to like appointments for diabetic clinic, which I've got, I tend to go to a lot, or various other appointments of things, I tend to find I sit and I wonder about people. I wonder about the doctors and their lives. I wonder about the patients who are sitting next to me, or if I'm going for some sort of, for example, counselling appointments, I'll wonder about like perhaps there's an older man sitting next to me or a younger girl sitting next to me, and I wonder what their stories are. And I thought, well, what if I write poems and each poem is the story of someone either working or attending the hospital as a patient, and what's going on in their lives, the things that we can't see behind just these normal people passing us. And that's a very, very different thing as well, and it's made me think a lot more, and it's again turning negative experiences into writing, which is what Small was, my second collection. And I'm interested to just see where it goes. Perhaps it won't go anywhere, but I'll get some poems out of it. But I'm not putting pressure on myself. I'm just writing what I feel I need to write in the moment, and that seemed to be what made me write Small so very quickly compared to On Suddenly You Find Yourself, which took about 2 years to write. Small took maybe 3 months to write. It just came out in a burst. So I think just go with your instincts if you're writing. The poem writes you, you don't write the poem, and I do believe that. I do think that you can't just go there to the page and say, I'm going to write a poem about this today, because it's stubborn. It's like writing characters. They do what they want. Your poem will do what it wants. Your poem will tell you what needs to be written. It'll tell you what's going on in your mind at that time. Just go with it. Just don't put pressure on yourself. Just enjoy being there with the words. If it works, great. If it doesn't, don't throw it, but keep it for an idea for later. I don't think you can go wrong with poetry. Just pull the pressure off yourself and just accept it and just enjoy the journey with it.